In the morning, she, one of 3 Republicans considered to be swing votes.
Mitch McConnell needs to keep the trio of Jeff Flake, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins together. If he keeps them together, he gets to 51. If he loses one of those 3, he's right at 50, and Mike Pence, the vice president, would break the tie.
Fox's Chad Pergram on Capitol Hill. 2 senators have told Fox News they expect the confirmation vote will come on Sunday. Lawyers for Judge Kavanaugh's primary accuser are criticizing the scope of the FBI investigation. In a statement, lawyers for Christine Blasey Ford say the investigation did not interview their client. Killed in the line of duty, a South Carolina police officer.
They were responding to the scene of an incident where they knew that their brothers from the sheriff's office, their brothers and sisters from the sheriff's office, were in need.
It's Florence County, South Carolina Police Chief Alan Heidler, who says the shooting started when sheriff's deputies tried to serve a warrant. The officer who died, Terrence Calloway, was behind the badge 30 years. 6 other officers were wounded. An equipment malfunction is blamed for pumping too much chlorine into the pool at a Thousand Oaks, California swim club Wednesday night. 12 people had to be hospitalized. The United Nations Humanitarian Office estimates that 200,000 people are in urgent need of help. In the wake of last week's earthquake in Indonesia, many people have had no food since the quake, and a big tsunami wave struck on Friday. Despite the desperation, the Indonesian military says looters will be shot on sight. Fox News, fair and balanced.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
The Trump administration pushing hard against the regime in Iran.
National Security Advisor John Bolton confirmed that the U.S. would withdraw from the 1955 Treaty of Amity with Iran and also withdraw from the optional protocol to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations on Dispute Settlement, both actions aimed at Iran's leadership.
Iran is a rogue regime. It has been a threat throughout the Middle East. Not only for its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs, but it's acted for decades as the central banker of international terrorism.
Bolton insisted that the U.S. policy goal for Iran is not regime change. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
A U.S. security firm is raising the alarm over a North Korean group that it says has stolen hundreds of millions of dollars by hacking the computer systems of banks worldwide since 2014. FireEye says the North Korean group is still operating and poses an active global threat. North Korea has denied any involvement in the cyber attacks. Attorney General Jeff Sessions in Utah Wednesday to celebrate strides in combating violent crime.
It was a year ago that Sessions reinvigorated Project Safe Neighborhoods, what he called a centerpiece of the U.S. crime reduction strategy. Speaking before law enforcement officers in Salt Lake City, Sessions says the program is helping to reach 4 key goals.
Reduce violent crime, reduce murders, reduce opioid prescriptions, reduce overdose deaths.
Sessions says committing more police, more attorneys, and better training at the state level is working, with FBI stats for last year showing reductions in murder and violent crime rates. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
New turmoil has roiled the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration's high-profile office in Colombia. 3 agents have left in recent months amid investigations into alleged misconduct, including passing secrets to drug cartels. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News Radio.
Hey, what's that?
Oh, it's a Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, back up. My Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked bread. Enjoy yours with mustard and pickles. Get a Big Hot Pastrami at your favorite Subway location. It's so good you won't want to share. For a limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless. The Bob Klitsky Show is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitsky, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitsky.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Where have you heard that before? Does that sound familiar at all? If it does, that means that you are a regular participant here at Tall Tales, probably an applicant for a life membership if you aren't already a life member of the Tall Tales Buff Society. If you're not, just stick in there, and the certificates of life membership are granted rather liberally here on Tall Tales. The requirements are not that great. We do like you to listen every day. If you can Facebook, that helps a lot. If you want to call in, it's 888-8255, 888-TALK. Calling in helps a lot. Being a silent listener, especially if you're driving down the road in your car listening to Tall Tales on the radio and you don't have a hands-free phone, that counts too, because we certainly wouldn't want you to do anything more dangerous than listening to Tall Tales. And of course, in these days of political correctness, I suppose there is a certain risk in identifying yourself as a regular listener of Tall Tales, because sometimes some of the things that are expressed, or perhaps better yet, explored here on Tall Tales, don't pass the political correctness test. So for some folks, that's the beauty of Tall Tales. And I hope that you're one of them. If you're not, listen for a while, and the more you're exposed to Tall Tales, the more clearly your thinking becomes on matters of political correctness. If it's not terribly politically incorrect of me to say that. So here we are on Tall Tales, and as you know, we usually start out with Zemi Ikotny, and when I do that, it causes the real Joe Cruz, who yesterday asked for a waiver to not attend, taking a page from Ray Tenorio's book, I guess. But the real Joe Cruz will play the theme song for Meet the Press, because that's what we do here. We examine the editorials of each of the newspapers and grade them. The better one gets a blue star. Sometimes editorials get, ordinarily it's a blue star for one and a blank page for the other. Sometimes, though, editorials, if they displease the ever-popular host of Tall Tales, can find something other on their grade slip than a blank piece of paper. I gave an F to the Daily News about 2 weeks ago. I gave some minus points here, I think, to the Daily News the other day, and I gave the Post an N, the N standing for naivete. They were so naive when they wrote their editorial that they took something that a politician said as straight talk and built their editorial around it. You'll never find that happening here on Tall Tales. So The Daily News today says our sailors helped save lives after New Guinea. So after the Air New Guinea crash in Chuuk. And that's true. And the editorial points out that there were some sailors from Underwater Construction Team 2 working on a project near the Chuuk Airport. And when the Boeing 737 attempted a marine landing instead of landing on the airstrip, the sailors were right out there climbing in that plane before it could sink, helping people get out and doing a really heroic job of saving, of life saving, etc. And the Post winds up by saying the sailors of Underwater Construction Team 2 exemplify the very best of the Navy and the U.S. military in general. Instead of standing back and watching events unfold, they took it upon themselves to take action to help others to save lives. They put themselves at risk, and the passengers and crew of that airplane will remember their selfless acts for years. So good job, Underwater Construction Team 2 and Daily News. Good that you recognize them. I'm only going to make one editorial comment here, and that is that the sailors of the Underwater Construction Team exemplify the very best of the Navy, according to this editorial. And I heard this kind of vague rumor, maybe it's a tall tale, probably it is, that there's a move afoot to change the name of the United States Navy to the MCTS. MCTS. Four initials, four letters that stand for Marine Corps Transportation Service. I don't know if that rumor is true, but I'm probably going to keep spreading it anyhow. After all, the name of the program is Tall Tales, right? So that's the Post editorial. And then the Daily News, as you were, that's the Daily News. And then the Post really took the gloves off today. But before I get into the Post editorial, I want to tell you how happy I am that I brought an autobiographical dimension to yesterday's Demi Ikotny. You'll recall that yesterday's Post editorial was called Help with Tips on Shooting of Dogs on Private Property. And I came forward and I wasn't sworn in. Even had I been under oath, I would have said the same thing. And that is that I've always been a dog man. I've always really liked dogs, always preferred dogs to cats. We had dogs when I was a kid. We've had dogs in my adult life. And I really like being around dogs. And I completely understand the saying that man is the dog's best friend, because I try to be a good friend to the dogs whenever I can. One of our posters yesterday, when I was comparing dogs and cats, one of our posters, it might have been Rico, said that dogs want, cats want to show you who's boss. Dogs just want to be your friend. So I was a little off the subject, and I inserted my own bias into that editorial, not in the name of full disclosure, but more in the name of just liking dogs. And I think I was vindicated because Barbara Streisand, that great political savant who, for whom everyone looks forward to her comments on political affairs, international events, etc., you name it. Everybody wants to know what Barbara said. And Barbara apparently has been watching the Kavanaugh proceedings quite avidly, and she couldn't resist making a very scathing comment about our president, about President Donald Trump. She really let him have it on this one. And here's what Barbara Streisand was reported as saying by Breitbart, one of the conservative newsletters that I read every day. Here's what Barbara Streisand said. Barbara Streisand, or here's what Breitbart says. Barbara Streisand uncovers bombshell. Donald Trump has never owned a dog. Yeah, Donald Trump has never owned a dog. Donald Trump has never owned a dog. What does it say about someone who doesn't like dogs? And, of course, his sons love killing wild animals for kicks. He's the first president in 130 years who hasn't had a dog in the White House. I could say something sarcastic about the Clinton administration, but I better just leave that one alone. Barbara Streisand tweeted, linking to an article from The Independent, that President Trump doesn't have a dog in the White House. Donald Trump has never owned a dog. Wow. What does that say about someone who doesn't like dogs? And if, he's the first president in 130 years who hasn't had a dog in the White House. Talk about bombshells. Wow, I mean, I'm going to have to really come up with something dramatic here, after reading that. Anything I'm going to say or do or any news story that I bring up is going to be pretty anti-climactic, right, after Barbara Streisand's bombshell. So, anyhow, luck was on my side yesterday when I decided to go with that. So let's see. I've got a Shepherd on the line here. Good afternoon, Mr. Shepherd.
Good afternoon, Bob. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. You mentioned the MCTS. Pretty good idea there. I'm a Air Force vet myself. But I do have a dear a Marine Corps friend who tells me from time to time that he is reminded that the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, and which doesn't bother him too much because he always reminds other people that it's the men's department.
Well, I hear what your friend is saying, and the old thing about considering the source. If you listen to a sailor long enough or a naval officer long enough, you can liable to hear almost anything when they're talking about the Marine Corps. But here's the facts. There is a department in the Department of Defense. There's a Department of the Air Force, a Department of the Army, a Department of the Navy, correct? And within the Department of the Navy, there are two co-equal services. One of them is called, and rightfully so, the Navy, and the other one is called the Marine Corps. But they are equal because the Chief of Naval Operations, although he's the top dog as far as the Navy is concerned, is not the top dog for the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has its commandant, who is the big gun in the Marine Corps. So, and then also you'll remember, I guess it was about 10 years ago, that a Marine Corps General Pace, was actually the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I hear what your friend is saying, and I understand the point he's trying to make, but no surprise, a little short on accuracy there, Shepherd.
Well, I learn something every day, I must say, from Tall Tales, and but I thought that was that always put a smile on my face, the men's department. But I just want to say God bless the USMC.
Well, thank you very much, Shepherd. And it's really dangerous now to use words like men on the radio to say it's the men's department. You might have. It's a good thing we don't have elevators in this building, because if we did, there's liable to be a couple of irate females out there holding the door open, scolding me, right?
Well, we all know it's mankind, and America would be we wouldn't be America without our sailors and our Marine Corps. Thanks for having me on the show.
Good talking to you, Shepherd. So That gentleman shepherded his resources in such a manner as to bring an important point before the Tall Tales International Radio listening audience. All you folks out there at 888-8255, if you want to emulate Shepard, that's all you got to do is hit those buttons, and you will find yourself on the air. And Lee Stolley, I hear what you're saying, Lee. I like the Navy too. It's just I was just wondering about that MCTS. Perhaps it's a great idea, the time for which has not yet arrived. And Carl's here. Carl, you probably appreciated Shepard's call, but since Shepard is an Air Force veteran, so here we are. So let's see. We got Lee Stolley on board and Carl Bora Nelson, Albert Eliasson, Semper Fi, and Rico Blancafor, Lynn and Vince Paulino, and Juanita Machi, of course. I haven't seen Lady D yet. I suspect she'll be with us shortly. She's a pretty regular participant here in the Facebook parts of the program. And then I'm going to the Post editorial. But before I get there, I'm going to read something from a Post news story. This was a Post story from today, and the headline is, "A Stumbo shelter closes today. Housing scuffles persist." And midway through the story, it says, "Closed at noon, reopened at 3 p.m. The Astumbo shelter initially closed at noon Wednesday, but reopened at 3 p.m. after Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio met with 2 displaced families of 8, whom he asked to remain at the gem overnight. The 2 families were planning to move in with relatives while they awaited permanent housing, but were told by Tenorio that they would be placed into permanent housing by today." This comes from Melissa Savaris, the Commissioner of Data. So that's kind of the threshold or the foundation for the editorial. And this is the Post editorial. Was Tenorio sincere in his last-minute effort to keep typhoon victims in shelter? At all that Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio needed was roughly 15 minutes of his time Wednesday afternoon to show up at the Superior Court and personally enter his plea of not guilty in connection with the charges against him in the gun-grabbing incident. Tall Tales translation, gun-grabbing incident in Tall Talesese is Glock Party, for those of you who may have forgotten. "We think it would have shown a better side of him had he appeared personally before Judge Benjamin Sison. Instead, there were elaborate reasons offered as to why Tenorio couldn't show up for his court hearing. A defendant can let his attorney appear on his behalf, but we question Tenorio's reasons for not taking the time to appear before the judge. A few hours before the hearing, his attorney filed court papers indicating Tenorio couldn't appear in court because he needed to, quote, address the needs of those left without shelter after the storm. Tenorio's attorney further stated the lieutenant governor had important duties to undertake, hence the proxy appearance in court. It turned out right around the same time that Tenorio was to appear in court, he instead showed up at the Astumbo Gym, which had been the secondary shelter for Guam residents. Before Tenorio showed up, the Daily Post had spoken to the mayor's office, which confirmed that the shelter closed at noon. There were still 2 families that came back for more of their belongings at the gym after the shelter had officially closed, and the remaining families had been leaving the gym to leave with family members while awaiting for government housing assistance. Quote, Tenorio went looking for them and said, "No, don't go to your relatives. Just stay at the gym," Savara said. Savara said, and she spoke to the Post before it became public that Tenorio told the court he wouldn't appear for his hearing. When Tenorio showed up at the shelter, he asked the 2 families to stay at the gym overnight, another night. He also asked the mayor to keep the shelter open overnight. When the Post caught up with Tenorio later in the afternoon, after his trip to the shelter, and as he was required to report to the probation office. Now you know that from yesterday that it's really the pretrial service office, but we'll call it the probation office. We asked him if he was concerned about the optics of showing up in court while running for governor and why he didn't go to court as everyone else does. He said being in court is like second nature to him, as he was a police officer for many years. He also said his main interest is, quote, for the people. And then the editorial writer poses a question. Was Tenorio sincere when he asked 2 families to stay in the gym for one more night when they were already on their way to stay with family members? And the answer to that is not only just no, but heck no. The answer to this question is up to each and everyone in our community to decide based on their gauge of what's right and what's wrong. So probably could have ended this editorial after the 3rd word in the headline, was Tenorio sincere? The answer, no, Tenorio wasn't sincere. He went through this elaborate charade, and my take yesterday was that he didn't want to face his accusers, the people of Guam, and that's why he didn't show up for his court hearing. But he, you know, he probably not only had a really good excuse, but he probably had his fingers crossed at the same time when he made up this ruse involving Melissa Savaras and those families at the Day-to-Day shelter. Most unfortunate. So I'm going to take a short break here, and then I'm going to come back and award the gold star, the blue star.
John Gibson, digging up history. The portrait painter who invented the telegraph because his wife died. We all learned in school that Samuel F.B. Morse invented the telegraph and the Morse code that gave us instant communication. Morse was actually a portrait painter. He painted President James Monroe. He painted members of Congress. So how did a portrait painter end up the inventor that brought us into an era of rapid communication? Morse, the artist, was in Washington, D.C., painting the portrait of Lafayette, the French general who helped America win the Revolutionary War. He got word his wife was dying. He immediately headed home to Massachusetts. But that was a trip that could take a week in those days. Arriving home, he found he was too late. His wife was not only already dead, he'd even missed the funeral. Distraught over slow communication, Morse put down his paintbrushes and began tinkering with the telegraph. Research in England already proved an electrical signal could be carried down a wire, and Morse invented a key device that sent a click on the wire. And then he invented a system of clicks, long and short, for letters of the alphabet, enabling an operator to quickly communicate words by wire. Samuel F.B. Morse and his Morse code successfully transmitted the first telegram in 1844. I'm John Gibson, digging up history.
For more than 40 years, we've earned your trust, caring for our island's health, quality care and access to health solutions you deserve. Take care, our Islander Health Plan.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitsky. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So here we are at that part of the program that causes the folks at the editorial boardrooms of both of the newspapers perhaps a little bit of anxiety, each of them hoping that they get the Blue Star. Well, I'm going to take a look at 3 editorials from the Post. Yesterday was help with tips on shooting dogs on private property. Well, that was not so badly done because it really appealed to one of my biases. And the day before that, this close to the election, we need candidates' solutions, not spin. And you could see that this one got graded with an N. And the N is for naivete because the Post was so naive that they took Lilian Guerrero's rap that she was concerned about the children's safety up there in Parisville, up in her neighborhood, and that's why she didn't think that the place for the foster kids should be built up there. So the Post's naivete prevented them from seeing a NIMBY-directed pretextual reason when it was pretty clear it would have jumped out and bit you in the nose had you been looking for it. So today, had they done the same thing today, they would have written an editorial about Ray Tenorio was so dedicated that he let his lawyer go to court for him instead of going himself so that he could help those 2 families up in Dido. So they weren't taken in the second time by Ray Tenorio. And I don't know if it's easier for them to be taken in by one candidate than the other, but at least they weren't so naive today. So today, number one, I suppose there will be those people out there chattering saying that I didn't give the Blue Star to the Daily News because they said nice things about the Navy, right? Yeah, well, I suppose when you're the host of Tall Tales, you have to learn to live with things like that. Even though they're not true, people are going to say stuff like that, you know. So today, the coveted Blue Star goes to the Post. There it is. The Post gets it for my analysis here. They really caught Ray Tenorio in something that, if it isn't a lie, it's in the L part of the dictionary, that's for sure. But he got caught on that, and it didn't work very well for him, did it? So let's see what I've got here. Jose Martinez chimes in and says, might there be a threshold where the constant coverage of Tenorio in this manner becomes exhausting? This is in no way a defense of Tenorio, however. So far, it seems all reactionary instead of really discovering or delving into the issues and policies of the candidates. Yeah, it's a pretty good point. Pretty good point, Jose. Of course, we know that the character of a candidate counts, and we're fully aware, having watched this whole Kavanaugh charade unfold, that once you've entered public life, probably no part of your life is sacred. You know, as far as Kavanaugh is concerned now, his high school yearbook has become a great bone of contention. And no one really cares about his judicial qualifications. And I think perhaps you're suggesting that we're kind of getting into the same thing here with Tenorio. Perhaps I have to plead guilty myself. I could tell you that today is Glock 70 plus 17, and we have spent a lot of time talking about the Glock party. I haven't taken the time to really criticize candidate scenario for his free education for everybody, which is the only thing that I can remember about his platform. But an interesting viewpoint, Jose, and we'll keep that in mind as we get closer and closer to the election. So that's Demi Cotney for today. And then I just got to stay with Kavanaugh a little bit longer. I hope we're not at the point where we've got Kavanaugh fatigue, but I've got an article from Town Hall by a guy named Matthew Vespa, and this is the title of the article. Kavanaugh's fate hinges on these senators, and Jeff Flake is looking spineless again. Now, I haven't checked with Amazon to see how the sales of Ralph Buchsbaum's treatise have gone, but I suspect that the demand for Ralph Buchsbaum's treatise has increased somewhat since Jeff Flake, or is it Flaky, has come on the scene and shows that he is, all humans, of course, are mammals, that he is an animal without a backbone. So this article says the final vote on the confirmation of Kavanaugh is coming soon. It's happening this week. It was supposed to be a smooth confirmation. It was looking like it. Then sexual misconduct allegations were hurled at Kavanaugh. 3 are the subject of a renewed FBI investigation, and all 3 without evidence or witnesses. The most outrageous one, that being Kavanaugh as part of a gang rape ring, has quickly come apart. But Democrats need a scalp. Now, are we talking about the senator from Massachusetts here? I wonder. And I guess that'll be the quiz question for today. Why in reference to that sentence, I'll read the sentence again, but Democrats need a scalp. Question is, are we talking about the senator from Massachusetts? Who can figure out what, if anything, I'm talking about there? They need to block his nomination at all costs. They cannot allow this man to be seated and cement his solid conservative majority on the court. They're playing dirty. Yes, they are. And that goes back to an intelligent, well-put call yesterday from Daryl Taggarty, who called me on saying that the Democrats have broken the rules. And I had to confess that Taggarty's view was clearer than mine, because Taggarty pointed out that there really are no rules in a situation like this. It's a knockdown, drag-out fight. So I'm going to take the time out here from this knockdown, drag-out fight. I've got a caller on the line. It's Brad, one of our kind of regular callers. Good afternoon, Brad.
Hi, hello, Bob. Good afternoon. How are you?
Couldn't be better, Brad.
Great. Hey, before we move on any further in talking about Judge Kavanaugh, going back to the newspapers. Okay. Not sure if you mentioned this a couple days ago, but there was an article in the PDN. You'll have to forgive me because I'm not sure if it was in the Post. I didn't read it in the Post. I read it in the PDN. Concerning a forum that's coming up for senatorial candidates.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. I think. Go ahead.
That would be the independent movement's trivia night, where they're going to ask questions of the candidates and see how well they do on the trivia questions pertaining to independence / self-determination, however you want to call it.
Okay.
And in the release, it talks about there'll be no winners or losers, of the game. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, there's no winners or losers in the game. First of all, why would anybody go to it if there's no winners or losers? And in life, aren't there winners and losers? in just about everything that you do, except for one thing that I can come up with, and that's going to church. I think everybody goes into church, a loser, and everybody comes out a winner. In the scope of things. And then going into that same, there's one particular paragraph that I'm really focused on, because that's where the PDN takes their main meat and potatoes. It's from a news release. So along with the winners or losers, I know I've called in previously to talk about the word educate.
Right.
Educating the public, educating, the masses, etc. But here's this word again. The intent is to educate the current slate of political leaders. So rather than using the word inform, here we go again, educating, as if they are the all-knowing and almighty going to educate, the political leaders. And then the last part of this paragraph, it's a small paragraph, and then it says to increase their knowledge base on this critical issue. So to me, you're really not increasing the knowledge base. What you're trying to do is you're trying to convince them of your position.
I think you're absolutely right. Indoctrinate, perhaps, is a better word than educate, correct?
Exactly, and this indoctrinate is perfect, because you have educate, increase their knowledge, versus just using more plain, simple language. We also have winners and losers. So to me, this is just in the big scope of things. To me, this is just one small part of increasing Marxism that groups like this are putting out in the public.
Well, it's part of that approach, and when it comes to names, we have this government undertaking called the Decolonization Commission, but I've renamed it the Chamorro Independence Commission, because that seems to be the only thing that it's interested in, and it's primarily prompted by Mike Bavacqua and people of his ilk. And for them, education, apparently from everything that I've read, education means showing the people what a horrible situation they have now, and that the only way that they could possibly improve their situation would be if Guam were an independent country from the United States. So when I read this, that's kind of what I thought is coming up here, this game of trivia. For instance, question number 1, what class of citizens are the people who live on Guam? Do you know the right answer to that one, Brad?
I do, but that's exactly why I think that this is, should be addressed, because a lot of the questions, the answers to them are their answers and not the answers to what are really there. And those answers could be opinions, really not supported by fact. And if somebody goes there based with facts and based with knowledge, they might upset the whole cart there.
Probably would. They would probably be somewhat ostracized as not being properly politically correct, right?
Oh, absolutely. And then they go on to list 7 individuals who are so far planning to attend, and these are on both sides of the aisle. And when I was mentioning the Marxism that's really coming about, I would consider some of these individuals, regardless of their party, as subscribing to some of that Marxism ideology.
I understand, Brad. I know exactly what you mean. So thanks a lot for calling in and pointing that out.
All right, Bob. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. So we got a couple more callers on the line. I've got Daryl, who never disappoints, and then after that, I'm probably going to be put in my place because I've got Jack on the line. So first Daryl, and then we'll get to you next, Jack. Hi, Daryl.
Hi there, Bob. I'm glad I called in right after Brad. I was calling about something to complain about the media. going back to the Glock party, all of the media, and then I'm going to get to something else about what Brad was saying and education.
Okay.
But I'm disappointed with the media downplaying the seriousness of Ray Tenorio's action. And the reason the way they do this is by not qualifying the gun as a loaded gun. And maybe it's because they don't want to be inflammatory, or they don't want to, ensure that he doesn't get a fair trial. But in fact, that gun was loaded, and it was ready for action. You take off the safety, and it's ready to go. And that's what he was playing with. And he's tried to downplay this. And if it was anyone else, it would be serious because it was a loaded gun that was being waved around, that was being toyed with. And I'm disappointed with the media not pointing this out, the seriousness of this play. It's like boys will be boys, kind of a dismissal. And I don't think that Ray or anyone else should get a buy on that. On Brad's comments about education, the candidates are in, and both the partisan candidates for the election and people like advocates like Michael Bevacqua, who are hoping to get the question of future status of Guam on a ballot. They're advocates in a marketplace of ideas where they are only expected, just like lawyers, to present one side, their side of the argument, because they are in the business of persuasion. They're not supposed to be. It's good if they have facts to back them up, but it is not. It is really not helpful to use names. I was called a communist once because I was watching CNN at the VFW, and I thought.
So what's the complaint about, Daryl? Daryl? So what's the complaint about? You're watching CNN?
No, but that's I was. Somebody walked up to me, and because I was looking at the CNN that was on over the bar, and I was interested in what they were saying, there was another patron who walked over to me and called me a communist, and I almost decked him because people from my generation and your generation went through the Cold War fighting communists.
Right.
And that I found that highly offensive to come from a person who was actually an out-of-uniform service member, active service member, and much too young to understand how offensive he was. But the point I wanted to make of this, and I didn't hit him, but I really wanted to, and I may next time I see him. But the point I wanted to make is that education, and you know this as a teacher, is to teach critical thinking so that you can take the persuasions or the attempts to persuade by different people, and you have the perspective and the tools to see what kind of games can be played with language and how well supported or not any argument is, the use of history, the misuse of history, to give you some basis for having performing your own thoughts on anything that comes up, whether it's the price of bread or
Daryl,
whether we should be independent.
Hey, Daryl. Excuse me, Daryl. Real Joe is playing Take 5, so I got to take a short break. It's short. Just if you could just hang on, and then I'll get to you, Jack, after that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, what's that?
Oh, it's a Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, back up. My Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked bread. Enjoy yours with mustard and pickles. Get a Big Hot Pastrami at your favorite Subway location. It's so good you won't want to share. For a limited time only. Subway. Make it what you want.
So, Daryl, maybe what Brad was doing is exactly what you were explaining. Maybe Brad was advocating his point, and of course, Daryl, excuse me. Maybe that's what Brad was doing, and of course, if there's any place that critical thinking is valued, it's right here on Tall Tales, right?
Yes, absolutely. We all get a chance to consider what's being presented, and you know, I may not agree with what Michael Bivacqua is doing, but you know, the other status advocates are supposed to get on the horse and start to ride. It's a race, and so if Michael's, you know, stolen a march on him and he's getting all the media, all the attention, it's because he's organized and he's moving, and the others are not. This has been going on for years. I sat down with Michael years ago before any of this stuff started, and you know, the other advocates got to get moving. They're concerned about the picking wallpaper and drapes.
I agree, Daryl. Glad you called in, Daryl. Your calls are always very interesting and very enlightening. I was wondering if maybe I can get Jack in before we do our big halftime show.
I'm looking forward to hearing what Jack has to say. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, Daryl. How you doing, Jack?
Hey, how's it going, Bob?
Are you going to tell me that I don't know Jack again?
I don't know. You probably know more about this than I do, but yesterday the nation had a national alert go off, and it got a hold of all the cell phone subscribers that in the mainland, and I was wondering why were we left out of the loop?
I heard a little bit about that out of the corner of my ear, but can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess it's the first time that that an alert of such scope, I should say, in which the president sent an alert out to notify, and it was a test alert. It's like almost like the one that they had in Hawaii when there was a missile that was shut off.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be tied into the FEMA system for storms and you know, hurricanes and national disasters and earthquakes, and also missile launches. So I'm just asking a simple question: why were we left out of the loop? And you know, the answers that I've been getting makes zero sense at all.
What were the answers you were getting?
That the providers here are not U.S. based.
Well, you know, I keep running. I think all of us keep running into that from time to time, don't we?
Yeah, but we fall under FCC rules and regulations.
True enough. I'm probably not going to be able to find the paper I'm looking for here. Yeah.
And you know, it's a shame that nobody is making a stink about this. And nobody in government, nobody in the private sector, nobody is a concerned citizen.
Kind of like...
I mean, we pride ourselves as being informed, and that's one of your mantras, is to be an informed citizen. How can we be an informed citizen when even the companies here are preventing us from being informed?
I guess my first response, Jack, would be to refer you to Hanlon's razor. Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity.
Well, you know, all the razors seems to be the same. They are all born from Occam's, so I guess it depends on how dull they are, right?
I guess.
How sharp they are.
So
for the purpose that they're used for.
That's a good question, Jack, and I'm going to throw that out to our international radio listening audience and see if anyone can bring some insight to it. I do have one response here, and that is we don't have that technology here on Guam because Calvo spent the E911 money on other things.
Yeah,
So maybe we could blame Kathy Kahigi and her kerfuffle for that one, huh?
I think it takes more than one person to make a conspiracy. So we need to see where the other shoe falls. But I think this is a grave concern, and I'm just surprised that nobody, no official, no legislature, no one from the administration is offended by this.
At least
talk about being second-hand citizens and being not included, not be fully included. I mean, what is the most worst egregious thing? Is that they have a system there to notify everybody, regardless. All you have to do is have a cell phone, and it will notify you of an emergency. And for us to be left out of that loop, I think somebody needs really to do some explanation on that.
Yeah. Okay, well,
we're paying money. How long have we been paying money into this E1 system? I mean, I know the political stuff that comes out, they use it for something else. But listen, we're talking about something that we're supposed to be on the grid for this. We're supposed to be on the grid for something, real time, such as these things, and
Jack,
frustration mounts.
Jack, you make a really good point, and I will enlist. I'm not going to swear out a Tall Tales posse, but I will enlist the assistance of our international radio listening audience on this.
Yeah,
point one, Jack, and then point two. I know that at the governor's office there is constant monitoring of Tall Tales. So what you said probably has gone straight to the ears of the governor, and he's probably thinking, "Well, I better get on my horse here, or people are going to say I don't know, Jack."
Yeah. So from my trunken tree, from my trunken Niedzuk tree here. I mean, it's not as reliable as yours because mine's a rhino beetle infested, so might be loose connection somewhere. But they tell me it's because none of the cell calories here are U.S. based, and I try to explain them. Regardless of their U.S. base, we fall under FCC rules and regulations.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then somebody needs to do something to work around the fact that we are, quote, not U.S. based. And I have a feeling I know what they're talking about because, when we got into the North American numbering plan, primarily through the efforts of a guy who calls here once in a while, a guy named Bob Kelly, got us into the North American numbering plan, which greatly reduced the cost of phone calls, et cetera. We did that for landlines, but we didn't do the same thing for cell phones. And that's why a cell phone that you could call all over the 50 states, when you come here, it's a totally different ballgame. So my suspicion is that this lack of alert is tied up in that same phenomenon, Jack.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that flies because I can say who my carrier is. It's GTA. And then when I go stateside, I got it on roaming.
That's the point. That's the point, Jack. You have to go on roaming. Anyhow, Jack, I got my big halftime show coming up. So thanks for calling in. So our big halftime show coming up here, the marching bands, the drill teams, the synchronized card sections in the grandstand, etc. So I'll see you after the big halftime show.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A report says there's still no corroboration. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Wall Street Journal reports White House sources have told it the White House has found no corroboration of sexual misconduct accusations against Judge Brett Kavanaugh in the FBI interviews done for the supplemental background check on the Supreme Court nominee. Senators will get their first look at the completed FBI report starting at 8 a.m.
Senators, starting with the chairman and ranking member, and then a limited group of aides, start to see this report from the FBI, which the Senate Majority Leader previewed on the floor.
This information comes on top of what was already been one of the most thorough and most exhaustive Senate reviews of any Supreme Court nominee in the entire history of our country.
As far as we know, neither Dr. Ford or Judge Kavanaugh have sat down for FBI interviews, although their stories are, of course, well known publicly for the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. Democratic senators are crying foul over that.
Fox's Leland Vittert. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell late Wednesday night filed a motion for cloture, the procedure required to cut off debate and move to a confirmation vote, which is now expected over the weekend. 7 police officers shot, one of them fatally, in Florence, South Carolina Wednesday afternoon. The shots rang out as the sheriff's office tried to serve a warrant.
I would ask that you please put these families of these officers in your prayers. Please lift them up. The victims in this case need all the help and support we can give them.
That's Florence County Sheriff Kenny Boone. Florence City Police Officer Terrence Caraway died from his wounds. He was a 30-year veteran of the force. The suspect was eventually arrested after a 2-hour standoff. Dow futures are down nearly 100 points. Day after the Dow gained 54. Fox News, fair and balanced.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
More bodies have been pulled from the rubble of a crumpled hotel in Palu City, Indonesia. That's near the epicenter of last week's earthquake. The number of people confirmed dead in the quake and the tsunami wave that followed now at 1,424.
As well as searching for loved ones, everyone is pretty much searching for water, for food, even for fuel. The situation is pretty desperate, although aid is slowly coming in, and that is getting better by the hour.
Sky News correspondent Mark Stone reports 92 people have also been arrested for looting. One child was killed, 3 others injured after their school bus crashed in North Texas. It happened in Mesquite, a suburb just east of Dallas. Police say they found the bus on its side lying in a ditch. As they responded, bus evidently struck a power line that ignited a brief fire. 38 other students were returned to the school to meet with their families and with counselors. A second man has been arrested in Tennessee in the theft of hundreds of guns from a parcel facility in Memphis.
Police say they now have Roland Jackson, the second suspect in the weekend theft. His partner, Tavian Turnbow, was taken into custody shortly after the guns and the U-Haul truck the men used to transport them was located in a Chicago suburb Sunday. The guns were being shipped through a Memphis UPS facility when the 2 men pulled up in the truck, loaded up the guns, and drove to the Chicago area. Police tracked the men down and questioned them before they ran. Jackson, a convicted felon, and Turnbow both face charges of illegally possessing firearms. Police are also looking into whether the duo sold 3 of the guns after stealing them. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
In Thousand Oaks, California, a mishap with pool chemicals has sent more than a dozen people, some of them children, to the hospital. The Ventura County Fire Department reports that 19 people were overcome by the fumes, apparently when a piece of equipment malfunctioned. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News Radio.
Grilled salmon, petite sirloin,
Can't decide.
What are you doing?
Making my top 10 list of favorite dishes at Ruby Tuesday.
You really need to get a hobby.
But I can't decide. There's no way I can narrow down so many classic dishes to just 10.
Then it's a good thing Ruby Tuesday did it for you.
It's the all-time favorites menu at Ruby Tuesday Guam. We took our most popular dishes and put them on one great menu for only $14.99. Hickory pork chop, Parmesan shrimp pasta, prime loco moco. 10 top sellers at one great price. Pick your favorite for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
Life is too short to be isolated from the people you love. Hearing loss is the invisible disability. The experts at Guam Hearing Doctors have solutions.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
The words came to me early one morning, and they ring true, whether it's about business or politics, as well as most other pursuits. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll get to those and add in the thoughts of an old workout partner.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
The Bob Klitsky Show is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Well, here we are. One more big halftime show. Sherry, I hope that radio silence has broken for you. And we got a caller here. Ted Lewis says, good afternoon, Bob. Your international listeners stay awake long enough to listen live. Great shows. Part of our international radio listening audience. And now, as though an answer to my prayers, I've got Bob Kelly on the line, who will probably be able to straighten us out on this telephone matter. Hi, Bob.
Yes, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain a little bit of what's happened here. Back when the Telecommunication Act of '96 passed and we got into the North American dialing plan and the domestic rates and what we're enjoying now with the 100 numbers and those services, and also the E-rates for the schools and libraries, those were things that existed then. But at that time, the penetration of cell phones was probably only about 4 or 5% across the United States. Again, we're talking 96. And we're also at a time where there was no such thing as the IP telephony, the type of calling cards and stuff that became very prevalent at about 2001, 2002, and we're still using today. So they were not included in the orders from the FCC, so those have been left out. There's been no petitions to make Guam treated domestically for the cell phone roaming and for the IP telephony. And the last 16 years, the administrations have not made telecommunications a focus to concentrate on. However, hopefully after the election, there is a team that has that as one of their planks to get in there, and we can look at getting Guam treated domestically for roaming, so anybody from the states would be able to work in Guam and vice versa, just like going between the states, and would also not have the international calling rates that exist on some of the cell phone companies in the states right now, like Verizon and Sprint.
Good. Does that tie into what Jack brought to our attention, Bob?
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Well, Jack said that there was a national alert that the president put out. There's some sort of a national alert system that's supposed to work on everyone's cell phone in the United States. And apparently it did, but it didn't work on our cell phones here. And I thought that the reason perhaps had something to do with what you were just talking about.
Well, it could have that, but let's talk about the alert today that occurred, I want to think it's at 3 in the morning. That also was a radio alert, which KNUT, all the radio stations on Guam, KUSG, KIJI with Choice, plus all the others, and the networks TV, or the local TVs and cable stations would have participated in. We are passing the messages now on the phones, at least I know for Choice Phone and for GTA, you will notice that you get alerts when there's weather alerts on your phone.
Okay.
But I'm not sure there's a system, and this gets a little bit more complicated. There's the iPause system, which is how the presidential alert came out throughout the United States. That's done on the network. And I don't believe that the local carriers are monitoring the iPause, only the National Weather Service right now. And I would have to check each carrier and find out, but I'm not sure that they would have been participating. But I'm not sure it went 100% in the United States either, because this is still new technology that's going out.
Okay, well, thanks for your explanation, Bob. And I know that as your knowledge increases, you'll be more than willing to share it with our Tall Tales International Radio listening audience, correct?
I would. And I would also very quickly like to say that it takes certain phones, and the carriers have to have a certain protocol, and most phones made in the last couple of years have it, to be able to receive the messages, because these are not text messages that get sent to every phone, or you would have to make a separate text message to every phone. There's a separate protocol that goes out that goes over a specific channel, and every phone should pick that up if they've got the proper phone software and the operating systems today, and should pick up on those alerts based upon where you're at. Again, they also are not based upon your phone number. So if you were in California, you should receive it from a California provider, not a Guam provider. And if somebody from the States is here using a phone, it should go to them. So it needs to be a location-based alert, because although this was a nationwide test, most alerts are more local in nature, including such things as amber alerts, silver alerts, and so on.
I see. Well, I have one poster here, a guy named Brad who explains it by saying the phones we have here on Guam are leftover Obama phones, and they're not compatible.
Well, if you don't have the right phone, that would be true.
Yeah, well, if it's an Obama phone, it's certainly not the right phone, right, Bob?
Well, that's right. Do you receive messages on your phone for weather alerts, high surf alerts, and so on your phone messages?
No, but of course my technology is not really very modern. You know, I probably had the last pager on Guam before I was persuaded to buy an iPad Touch. So I've got an iPhone 4, and I suspect that's probably one of the last steam-powered cell phones on the island.
Okay. Well, anyway, we'll be having everybody, I'm sure, over the next few years. The technology will be moving ahead and provide much better alerts. And we need them for local conditions also.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the information, Bob.
You're welcome.
So long. So I guess Shepard had so much fun that he wanted to come back for a second inning, right, Shep?
Yeah, that's correct. I know I'm not a frequent caller, but I guess today I qualify as a two-timer. I'd like to say thank you. That your halftime music, the Tchaikovsky's 1812. I took my family this year, 4th of July. We went to Boston, and on the hat shell near the end of the show, and the Army actually shoots off real cannons right there by the stage. It's wonderful. And it kind of ties into what I wanted to call about. I know your worldwide audience, you cover some real heavy topics, some important stuff, lots of stuff going on lately. But just to lighten it up, when I was Boston is my adopted home, and we have a Best of Boston, just like recently here. I don't know how many years they do it. They have a Best of Guam, and when you earn this award, it's very coveted, highly coveted award. And I look at this year's Best of Guam. It seems to be, to me, I don't know if anyone else or what your thoughts or people want to weigh in on. They give, just best of everything, and it kind of dilutes things. And the number of establishments, and I'm not a shill for any one of them, but I almost chuckle at some of the ones that win best of, when over time I all have different tastes, but it just kind of amazes me what wins best. And when I was driving through Antigua today, I'm northbound on Marine Corps, and I see a sign outside of Burger King that says, "Congratulations, Pika's best burger, Guam's best burger." And when I saw that sign, I said, I'm going to call Bob. I got to call Bob. When I remember not too many years ago, when Sume Grill would win, or the Marina down at Agate, I'd go on down there, and boy, it surely was really, really good. And now the whole contest, for lack of a better word, seems to be so watered down, and you have a national chain that produces, stamps out these industrial burgers, and that's the best that Guam can do. And when I talk to my friends, I think the consensus is if you advertise in the PDN, you too can win, a Best of Guam, Pika's Best of Guam award. And, not a world-shattering topic here, but it just doesn't seem it just seemed odd to me, and I was wondering if you'd weigh in on that.
Well, maybe I ought to add that to the format of the show right after the Meet the Press, right? Maybe after Meet the Press, we could have Meet the Burgers.
Meet the Burgers.
Yeah, and I would take nominees not from our international radio listening audience, but just our extensive local radio listening audience as to where they thought the best burgers were available here on Guam.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. And one other thing, I was listening to a man, I don't recall his name, he was talking about winning and losing, and, he says losers, you go into math a loser and you come out a winner. And what a kind thought. I like people who look at the bright side. I had someone once explain it to me that during the week, we're all floating in an ocean on a boat. And during the week, you get holes in your boat, and you get a leaky boat, and you got to pull in on Sundays, and you get repairs to your boat, and away you go to start a new week fresh. And I couldn't agree with that man more, with the going in a loser, so to speak, and coming out feeling like a winner. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, Shepard. So I think Shepard's last remark there about the boats and everything like that takes us back to the Navy, but maybe not. And then on the matter of phones here, when Bob Kelly agreed with me that the Obama phones wouldn't be the right phones, Jose Martinez helped out by saying that the Obama phones are leftovers. Where is that? Yeah, there you go. So
I'm sorry, Bob. Sometimes I'm a little slow.
Yeah.
Your jokes are...
Yeah, well, Tall Tales here, we like plays on words and puns and things like that. So all you international radio listening audiences and our international radio listening audience, and you Facebookers, go for it. So no more phone calls for a minute. I saw Daryl on the line, but he had to hang up. Probably had to do something with his dad. But Daryl, when you get a moment, call back, and we'll let you ride again on the same ticket. So I was just starting on this town hall article here on Kavanaugh's fate hinges on these senators, and Jeff Flake is looking spineless again. You know, I wonder maybe we should chip in and send Jeff Flake to an orthopedic surgeon. I don't know if there's such a thing as a spine transplant or not, but it'd be worth a try. So the GOP has a slim Senate majority. They can only afford to lose 2 votes. Right now there are 5 wild cards, but prior to Flake stabbing the party in the back, we had 51 votes, according to a Senate insider. So the Senate insider is not named. So continuing on here with the same article, it's the usual suspects: Senator Heitkamp, Collins, Flake, Murkowski, and Manchin. And some of these senators' pressure points come from unlikely places. MSN reported that Murkowski could face pressure from Alaska natives if she votes for Kavanaugh. They're not too thrilled with him over some opinions about indigenous rights. You remember a few days ago when we were talking to talking about award winner Mazie Hirono. Mazie was pandering to Lisa Murkowski, pointing out to her that, you know, this guy is not too hot on indigenous rights. And then we have Collins, Susan Collins. A group of liberal activists created a crowdfunding campaign that has raised more than $1.75 million that donors pledged would be given to her opponent if she votes for the judge's confirmation. Collins has hotly criticized these efforts, describing the crowdfunding as the equivalent of an attempt to bribe me. Well, it's interesting to see that there's some people back there with something that looks like scruples. And then Jeff Flakey, I want to support him. I'm a conservative. He's a conservative judge. But I want I want a process we can be proud of. And I think the country needs to be behind it. But before then, Flakey had offered his own simple test. If you believe her, you vote no. It's a little bit more of an highly articulated test than Mazie Hirono's test, anyhow. So Manchin voted to confirm Judge Gorsuch, who was Trump's first pick, but Manchin has repeatedly voted against attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act and has stressed that he wants the courts to go conservative. The Act's protections for people with pre-existing health conditions. After meeting with Kavanaugh, the senator said in a radio interview in July that he was not leaning in a particular direction, but found the judge to have all the right qualities. And then Heidi Heitkamp has made comments suggesting she is uneasy with the allegations against Judge Kavanaugh. So this is what the Capitol Insider said. If I had to roll the dice, I would say Flake, Collins, and Murkowski stick together. If Flake, Collins, and Murkowski stick together, then Manchin joins with Heitkamp joining the rest of her Democrat colleagues. Manchin has repeatedly said that re-election is not important to him, and he's fine taking his ball and going home if booted in November. Re-election is not that important to me, he said. The way I look at it, if you beat me, I go home. On Tuesday morning, Senator Coons and Jeff Flakey both expressed dismay about the partisan brawling over Supreme Court nominees. Coons called for reducing the frequency with which we describe judges as wearing red or blue jerseys. He argued that senators need to commit to reviving the practice of confirming nominees based on their qualifications, not ideology. Well, and then here's the Washington Insider. For starters, it is about blue and red jerseys. It's about blue and red states, us and them, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats. There are two sides. One side is the enemy. Get used to it. This is politics, an organization of animosities. If you can't stomach that, then get out. It's a street fight right now, and it looks like Flake just might screw us in the end, dashing his side's chances of a generation-long conservative victory. And that sentiment, that analysis, is exactly the reason that I predicted that Brett Kavanaugh is not going to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. And on the strength of my prediction, Tom Poole has said that he's bet $100 against it. So when it comes right down to it, when you get into this kind of a bare-knuckled fight, we can't put on 16-ounce boxing gloves and say, well, we got a good chance of winning. So back to Shepard's call. Brad Hewitt, their fried fish burger and Pika burger round out their best of menu. The bread they use seems different from all the other eating joints. And Brad is commenting on Arthur Hammeister. I hope that's I wonder if it is. It sounds like a name that one would make up if he were going to comment about hamburgers, but maybe it's his actual name, Arthur Hammeister. Sume Bar and Grill burgers are the best. Ate there for lunch. Bacon cheeseburgers from there are quite juicy and tender. I saw the Burger King sign yesterday as well and couldn't believe my eyes. Go, Bob. So, and then we had Brad's comment there. So, I suppose hamburgers are important, but I want to take the conversation back to something perhaps a little bit more weighty. Not that we don't have time for levity here on Tall Tales, but I want to go back to the continuing saga of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission scam. And got a seventh inning stretch coming up, so I'm going to stretch, and then we'll come back to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission scam.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
The words came to me early one morning, and they ring true, whether it's about business or politics, as well as most other pursuits. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll get to those and add in the thoughts of an old workout partner.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
nice hit. So Rico Blancafor chimes in during the seventh inning stretch and says, if Kavanaugh is not confirmed, do you think conservatives will come out in droves in November to punish the Democrats? A red wave. Well, some of the stuff that I've been reading suggests that some of the pollsters have found that there is a backlash against the Democrats caused by the way Kavanaugh has been treated. So the blue wave has shrunken down to considerably, and I think that's a strong possibility that the entire Kavanaugh confirmation may have an extremely important role in the November midterms. Of course, president parties always lose something during the midterms elections. So the idea is to kind of hold that down a little bit. But and then, of course, some of the senators like Manchin and Heidkamp come from states where the red wave is certainly possible. So I suppose that they have that in the back of their mind, although Manchin says that he doesn't really want to, he's really not interested in running for re-election. So putting that aside for a second and turning back to Jack, and Daryl does a post here, had called back in to straighten out Jack's confusion of EAL cell notifications and E911, next generation NG 911 now. But Bob Kelly called, so I dropped out. I've been involved with this as an FM and television station manager and licensee, civil defense administrator and employee of Bob Kelly at his telecom consultancy. Bob explained half because he didn't hear Jack. Yeah, well, if you missed Jack, you missed a lot. So we'll continue on with this. And Daryl, I suspect, given your background, you have more information on this. So I know this is a busy time of the afternoon for you, but maybe you could call in tomorrow and give us the other half that Bob didn't give us because he hadn't heard what Jack said, and I probably wasn't very good at relaying what Jack said. So as usual, I appreciate it when you chime in, Daryl. So leaving E911 or NG91 aside and putting Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation on hold for a minute and turning to the CLTC, the latest thing in the CLTC, of course, in addition to all of the things that we're doing here to keep the scandal alive, there is the problem of the U.S. Justice Department bringing suit against the government of Guam for violating the Fair Housing Act. And here's the latest on that. In court papers filed in federal court on Tuesday, the AG's office, that's our AG, through Deputy Attorney General Ken Orcutt, denies that the term, he denies that the term, quote, native Chamorro, close quote, as stated in the Chamorro Land Trust Act, is a racial or ethnic term. That's an interesting statement. The CLTA does not discriminate on the basis of race, but is an act designed to correct an injustice caused by the wholesale taking of Guam land by the United States military between 1898 and 1950, the AG's office states. The CLTA has nothing to do with perpetuating racial discrimination in housing and has everything to do about rectifying the inequities of the post-war land taking by the United States military. So it's hard to say what the Attorney General's position is because people who write news stories like this particular story, this is the Post, don't have time to go through all of the papers that are on file with the court. and bring the kind of insight to those papers that maybe is necessary to fully report the litigation position of the government of Guam. But it's really hard to keep a straight face and say that the term, quote, native Chamorro is not a racial or ethnic term, when even the most ardent supporters of the act will tell you in a heartbeat that it is to preserve land for Chamorros. It's not there to preserve land for anybody but Chamorros. Now, there are a couple of areas of the law that perhaps the Attorney General is trying to get at. This is just pure speculation on my part. There is some case law that says when it comes to things like admission policies to school, race can be taken into consideration in the name of diversity, which is something I'll get to in the last 10 minutes of the program. So that would be a permissible purpose that might get around an equal protection violation. And then there's also the concept that some kinds of legislation that remedy the effects of past discrimination would pass constitutional muster. Now, I don't think a territory has the ability to engage in that kind of legislation, but I'm speaking here from the curbstone, not from a point of great research, but perhaps that's what Ken Orcutt is alluding to in this latest filing with the district court concerning the constitutionality of the Chamorro Land Trust. So I just thought I'd mention that so that if you were wondering when you saw the statement that native Chamorro is not a racial or ethnic term, if you'd have to junk your dictionaries and start over from scratch. So then getting to the local parts of the Chamorro Land Trust Act, what I refer to as the Chamorro Land Trust Act scandal. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission ratified almost 3,000 leases and is planning on seeking validation for some senators for leases it voted to ratify. This is a KUAM from last night. The CLTC will also seek approval from the legislature for the 102 leases the Attorney General deemed null and void in a May legal opinion. A KM News investigation months ago found employees of the Department of Land Management and their relatives switched places in line, meaning employees and their relatives had either received leases or were in the process of receiving leases, while other CLTC applicants waited decades without so much as a phone call from the Chamorro Land Trust. Now, you can see why I always want to change it from CLTA to CLTAS, Chamorro Land Trust Act scandal. Many of the leases granted to DLM employees and their relatives were in the controversial Barragata Heights CLTC property. CLTC documents show that several land trust lots in Barragata Heights have been appraised at upwards of $400,000 per lot. One CLTC Barragata Heights lot leased to Joseph A. Benevente has an assessed value of $707,255, according to an internal CLTC working document obtained by KUAM News. $700,000. Despite questions from CLTC board leadership, the media, CLTC leaseholders, CLTC applicants, the public, and elected officials, the CLTC has not rescinded or revoked a single lease or conducted a further look into whether or not employees use their authority to fast-track leases for their family members or themselves. No leases have been voided, CLTC Chair Pika Feharan said yesterday at yesterday's meeting. A policy approved by the board months ago requiring DLM and CLTC employees to disclose how they are related to lessees and applicants has not moved forward since its adoption, meaning they haven't done it. In a May legal opinion prompted by KOM News investigative reports, Attorney General Anderson opined that thousands of leases lacking proper approval from the CLTC were voidable, not void. Other leases in which applicants switched places in line and leases that were passed on from living original applicants who had held a lease for less than 7 years were said to be null and void by the AG. However, the CLTC has found that applying the AG's legal opinion and adhering to the rules for the Chamorro Land Trust across the board would be too problematic for CLTC leaseholders and applicants, especially the ones who were employees at the Department of Land Management and were able to use their positions to get those leaseholders. That just wouldn't be fair, would it? Josh Leon Guerrero was one of several CLTC applicants at yesterday's meeting looking for answers. While some have waited decades for CLTC land, Leon Guerrero is a fairly new applicant. A new applicant, 2015, Leon Guerrero said, but I was told I can transfer or swap places with my uncle, which I did. And he's a 1995 applicant. Since then, I haven't had any updates or call from the office. So this is more of a follow-up. So, wow. CLTC Board Chair Pika Feharan said that the CLTC hasn't addressed application right switches, which are not covered in the CLTC's rules. The CLT is also not issuing new leases at this time. I guess the reason they're not issuing new leases is because Michael Bora ran out of relatives. DLM Director Michael Bora, whose sister was slated to receive a lot in Barragata Heights until she rescinded her application amid the controversy surrounding the awarding of leases in the area, proposed rule changes allowing switches in place and line switching application rights. The AG's opinion stated that the law does not allow such practices. These rule changes would have to be approved. Senators, including Regine Lee, who has a pending CLTC lease for a lot in Barragata Heights, said she inherited her application lease from her mother, who was still living 1995 CLTC applicant. Lee asked for an investigation into awarding leases in Barragata Heights. Lee said in a statement to KOM News, after requesting and receiving the AG's opinion, well, this is a statement from her, she said that she rejected in writing any claim to a CLTC lease. So good for her. So that's where we are now. And I've got some of the older stories dealing with the CLTC that I might just dig around in here with in a minute. For a minute, I had an interesting post from Daryl, but I seem to have lost it somehow. Sorry, Daryl, it looked pretty interesting as I was looking at it out of the corner of my eye, but wait a minute, maybe I pick it up off my iPad here. Yeah, Daryl says that don't forget the rationale for Native American reservations and current day exemptions from federal and I can't pick it, from federal and state laws on gambling. Non-class members can buy reservation land, just a parallel, not an equal, equivalent, or precedent. And not even close, Daryl, because Native American tribes are sui generis. They're in a class by themselves. And when we talk about this, I always pick up my copy of the Constitution and go to Article 1, Section 8. Section 8, paragraph 3 of which says that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So Indian tribes are separate sovereigns, so the rules that apply to them don't apply elsewhere. And we don't have time to go into gambling on Indian reservations or by Indian tribes, but it all springs from that provision in the Commerce Clause, and it isn't any help for us with our Chamorro Land Trust Act. So going back into the CLTC here. Controversy is surrounding the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, etc. Department Director Michael Bora was shocked when we told him the results of our investigation into who was awarded lots in Barragata Heights. Cross-referencing staffing patterns for land management in the Chamorro Land Commission, we were able to find out several employees of the agency and their immediate families received CLTC lots in Barragata Heights. Land management employees Glenn A. and Matthew Leon Guerrero received CLTC lots in Barragata Heights. It doesn't stop there. Leon Guerrero's wife also received a lot. A.'s daughter, Chelsea, received a lot. And DLM employee Stephanie Duena's daughter, Abreen, also received a lot in Barragata Heights. Land management employee Albert Pasqua's son, Gilbert, also received a lot. And if that wasn't enough to make you say, both of land management employee Catherine Berseman's son received lots. And land administrator Margarita Vergara Bora's daughter, Mariah V. Bora, also received a lot after she switched places with someone on the waiting list. Most of this information was news to Director Bora, and he admits he does not like land management employees and their families getting the hookup. Yes, I guess you could make that assumption that it's beyond coincidence, but I don't think there's a concerted effort to try and get people the best choice property. Bora says all the people who got lots in the area have applied since 1995. But a review of information from Bora's office shows that's not exactly the case. And he says preferential treatment was not the reason DPW was clearing an access way to the property. Well, there's more to this, and I'm going to pick it up tomorrow and go back through some of these old stories, which really drop the dime on the whole scandal and show how silly it is to just say, well, we'll let all these things go and ask the legislature to unvoid all those leases. So we're going to head down the home stretch, and then I'm going to do a little social commentary to wrap up the last 10 minutes of the program.
Are high power bills sending your budget into chaos?
Take control with the help of Micronesia Renewable Energy. Using the highest quality panels, a solar energy system from MRE will guarantee to save you money on power. With MRE, Christmas comes early. With every solar energy system, homeowners not only get $400 for signing up, but also an entry for a chance to win $1,000 in cold, hard cash, just in time for Christmas. It pays to be an MRE customer. Conditions apply. Call 632-2613 for details. MRE, the smarter choice.
So here we are in the home stretch at Tall Tales. We've got about 10 minutes, about 8 minutes until I hear the strains of Ravel's Bolero. I wonder if Shepard likes Ravel's Bolero. He and I both like the 1812 Overture. I don't know if the one that we play is from the Boston Pop Symphony Orchestra, but it sure sounds like it. So yesterday we talked a little bit about the Great Awakening, and what it lays out is kind of how to do it if you are a white man, how you can survive as a white man. And I suppose I'm a little bit ethnocentric there myself for taking a little time to read this. But I think that it goes far beyond the color of anyone's skin, and it tells us what kind of a country some people want us to live in. Not me, but I think there are some people that want us to live in a country that is governed strictly by identity politics. And I have to, of course, confess my own upbringing. We learned in grade school that the motto of the United States, E pluribus unum, means from many, one. And we also learned in our social studies classes that the United States was a melting pot, that people came from all different kinds of countries and moved into the United States, and instead of being whatever they were before they came, they or their children or their children's children embraced the idea that they were Americans, and this surmounted their ethnic origin or the place where their parents came from. Nowadays, if a person said, well, the United States was a melting pot and still should be a melting pot, someone would whip the B word out on you in a heartbeat, and you would be called a bigot for saying such an outrageous thing, because it is obviously contradictory to the idea of identity politics. So here are the 5 propositions that one must embrace if he is to fit into the world governed by identity politics. 1, all demographic groups are roughly biologically the same. 2, bigotry is pervasive. 3, almost all disparities among demographic groups are caused by bigotry. 4, if we all work really hard, we can create a more just, multicultural society. 5, diversity is almost always a good thing. Number 2, that's bigotry, is a universal explanation. If you think that disparities might have causes other than bigotry, you're a bigot. If you think that there might be downsides to certain kinds of diversity, you're a bigot. If you think that some humans are biologically male and others biologically female, you're a bigot. These tenets are linked to a sacred narrative about the victimization of certain groups. And I've talked about this before, villains and victims. Members of these groups are to be considered the innocent victims of an oppressive and iniquitous patriarchy. Whites, on the other hand, are born burdened with the original sin of privilege, and they are therefore presumptively complicit in the system unless they declare fidelity to the 5 principles I just laid out. Belonging is signaled by language. Those who preach its gospel often use bizarre concepts imported from postmodern theorists. Impenetrable prose, terms such as hegemonic, intersectional, phallocentric, and queerphobe are regularly deployed, intimidating the uninitiated and impressing those who wish in the future to signal their erudition to fawning fans. The jargon confers status because it doesn't come easily. So, in other words, if you would survive, you must embrace those 5 tenets that I read at the beginning. Now, to me, and I don't think I'm the only one, this whole idea of awakening, this whole idea of wokeness that I've just been talking about, borders on cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism, if it isn't a classic example. And if you're interested in cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism, you might want to Google the term Frankfurt School. Frankfurt, F-A-R-N-K-F-U-R-T, Frankfurt School. And one of the big heroes of the Frankfurt School was a gentleman named Herbert Marcuse. And Herbert Marcuse says this: surely no government can be expected to foster its own subversion, but in a democracy, such a right is vested in the people, that is, a majority. This means that ways should not be blocked on which a subversive majority could develop, and if they are blocked by organized repression, indoctrination, their reopening may require apparently undemocratic means. Now, this is pretty important, and my favorite song here, Bolero, gets pretty loud at this point of the program. So I'm going to come back tomorrow with 10 minutes of social commentary, and I'm going to pick up on Herbert Marcuse. And if you want a homework assignment, then your homework assignment is to Google Frankfurt School, the Frankfurt School, and see if you can see any aspects of the Frankfurt School in our country today. So I'll be looking forward to that part of the program tomorrow. Great callers today, great phone, great Facebookers, and as usual, Tall Tales has been a great pleasure for me, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Adios, esta gupa.
The Point is KUSG.